In June, the Supreme Court is set to decide on an issue involving sexual or sex offenders and what type of activity they should be allowed to take part in on social media. Now, North Carolina passed a law back in 2008 that bars registered sex offenders from using social media. Now, as a result, a registered sex offender by the name of Lester Gerard Packingham has been rearrested because he broke that law. He was a registered sex offender, and then he was caught on Facebook posting something that, of course, got him in trouble. Packingham was added to the sex offender registry back in 2002 after he was arrested for having sex with a 13-year-old girl and pleaded guilty. He was given a suspended jail sentence, but was later arrested for a Facebook post in which he thanked God for not receiving a traffic ticket. So his Facebook activity was nothing illegal if he wasn't a sex offender. However, because he is a sex offender, he wasn't able to use the social media site at all. The law's wording, though, according to his lawyer, was so vague that it could be used to bar access to the New York Times website because it has a social networking component. So that was an argument that the Packingham's lawyer made in court. Now, Robert Montgomery, who is the senior deputy attorney general, says it has to be remembered that these are sex offenders who have been convicted of sex offenses, and they should be cut off from sources of information that they can use to perpetuate their crimes against children. And so they are being cut off from these particular websites, but they have other means in which they can gather news, that they can communicate with friends, and they can share their pictures, right? So the argument is, well, look, if you're saying that sex offenders should be able to use these websites because it's like a freedom of information thing, they can use other sites to get this information or receive information. They don't need to go to Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram and yada yada. So anyway, this case is going all the way up to the Supreme Court, and already at least 5 judges have hinted that they are likely to strike down North Carolina's law. And I think it's an interesting issue. So let's discuss.
I think the reason why we're seeing a lot of the Supreme Court justices sort of leaning towards, at least in their opening statements and questioning, striking down this law is because it's very amorphous language. I think that's what's important to point out. It's very broad strokes here, and I think that it's possible that North Carolina could reinstate this law or something similar to it, but with stronger wording that is a little bit more specific, because it does bar any website with like a chat room sort of component, and that is very broad in its own sense, because what is a chat room component? Is that like the comment section?
You can't even go on YouTube.
Yahoo,
like you can't go on New York Times because there's a comment section on there, because you could have access to minors and you could talk to them.
I think it'll be interesting to see maybe apply sort of some parole conditions with regards to social media. And there are certain websites that you need to have a profile to access, and then there's certain websites that you don't. For example, Twitter, you can go on Twitter and look through different tweets and see what's going on, which is a great marketplace for information without having a Twitter account. And then on Facebook, it is a little bit more difficult to access.
You can't.
What?
You can't access Facebook.
Right, but I mean, I've been able to see them. When I don't have an account, like you can see.
Someone has to send you a
page.
link.
Right, someone has to send you a link. It's a very roundabout way. I don't really think that's necessary. So I think that they just need to go. North Carolina needs to go back and rewrite this law and be a little bit more clear on their definitions of what is what.
Yeah, so the wording of the law is too vague, and I'm glad that you brought that up. But the Supreme Court justices that have already commented on this case have made it clear that they're looking at very clear social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, and whether or not it's okay for registered sex offenders to use these sites. So not only are they going to look into the vagueness of this law and how it should be reworded if they want to reinstate it, but also whether or not these people should be able to use well-known common social networking sites. So let me give you a statement from Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan. She says, everybody uses Twitter. All 50 governors, all 100 senators, every member of the House has a Twitter account. So this has become a crucially important channel of political communication. Ruth Bader Ginsburg says something similar. These are people being cut off from a very large part of the marketplace of ideas. The First Amendment includes not only the right to speak, but the right to receive information. Now, I'm going to add another wrinkle to this story that I think is important to mention. Many states, including North Carolina, have laws that would make something like indecent exposure a sex crime. And so you would have to register as a sex offender if you get convicted of indecent exposure.
Yes.
Now, in many cases, there have been situations where someone is urinating publicly and that's considered indecent exposure. They get convicted, and if they're, a victim of the two-tier justice system and they don't have the resources for the best attorney, well, they could get convicted and they might have to register. And if they register, they're on a list along with people who have been convicted for rape, forcibly raping people. And I think that that's crazy. And so making people register as sex offenders for urinating publicly is bad enough, but then having laws like this that prevent them from using social media just adds an extra layer to it. So I feel like there are so many flawed components of this story. The vagueness of this particular law that was passed in 2008, including, public urination along with others in this registry of violent criminals. It's all so flawed.
And we're seeing this more and more, that we need to start re-examining the laws that we have in place as technology advances, as social media advances and becomes more far-reaching than it ever has been before. I think that it's not beyond, I don't think it's beyond someone who is convicted of a sexual assault, of maybe a violent sexual assault, of having to turn in their search histories, there needs to be a little bit more effort with oversight, but I don't think that we can take away social media as it is so ingrained in understanding the world around you. Now, there was an argument that was made by Justice Samuel Alito, basically saying that there are other ways to consume media and information. I know it seems like we never lived in an age without Twitter, but in fact we did. And I think that that is an interesting argument to make, but unfortunately it's just, look at the precedent that we have. Our president is tweeting all the time.
Yeah.
You're gonna say that someone can't access that information from the president of the United States because
you might be doing them a favor.
And plus,
that's the argument.
Look,
There's
also never been an instance where, even I think in the follow-up to Alito's statement, he even mentions, but any channels of communication that were available at that time have been taken away. So he even acknowledges that there's no precedent for taking away your phone when in fact you could actually call up a 13-year-old person with your phone if you were a registered sex offender. So like you said, because Twitter and social media now is becoming a very real part of our lives and a part of how we communicate and find out new information about what's going on in the world, it's almost impossible to completely shut off access to it. And having said that, by the way, on top of that, I do see the other side's argument, though, because it's very easy to portray someone who has been committed, especially of a violent sexual act against minors. It's very easy to paint the picture that they are, inhumane and don't deserve these access to Twitter. Fuck them, they don't deserve it.
That's why we need to go back.
And that's why they're making this argument.
And maybe you don't need to be on OkCupid and Tinder, and if you were, you know what I mean. I think that's why we need to go back and rewrite these laws and make sure there's more regulation and oversight. But I think blanket general terminologies like no social media, that doesn't make any sense. How do you even define what social media is? Because again, it could be Yahoo News, it could be the New York Times. For my mom, it's AOL. Which she's not a sex offender. Damn it, Grace. Damn it. My mom is a sweet woman. I did that to myself.
She's a very sweet woman.
If you sign up for TYT membership, you'll be saying,
thanks a lot, bitch.
TYTnetwork.com/join.